Hi, my name is Sheila Landry of Sheila Landry Designs, and today's video is going to be some of the techniques that I used on this little project that I created for Tolltown, the online painting community. The link will be in the bottom of the video, and Tolltown is like a fun place for decorative painters of all levels to hang around and get patterns and make friends. And each month they offer 2 full projects with video clips and then a quick paint, which is like an easier project. And then Lori also offers a line drawing, which is like a challenge design that you can do what you want with. So today's project for September 2017 is this little black kitty and pumpkin, and it's on one of my bevel cut leaf surfaces, though it'll fit on just about any surface. And what I like about these, they've kind of become my trademark, is that they're 2-piece frames. They're self-framing, and the oval in the middle is cut on a bevel so that when it's put back together it pushes back a little bit and makes a frame. Now I'm going to show you later, I didn't do the back of mine completely because I'm going to paint that with you and then we'll put it together. So I'm saving that for this one. But what I really wanted to show you on the video today is how to do this background. And I did another practice one here. Let me get it for you. Just to practice, because it actually took me 3 tries to get it how I want, to get my technique down how I want it. I used Deco Art Americanas, the regular paints with this. And this leaf is a little smaller than that, which is, I was playing with different surfaces. It's the same shape though, and the technique of course will be the same. And I thought too it'll be easier to keep it on camera with a smaller piece. So we're going to do this layered background and show you how that will go into place. So we can get started, and we'll take apart our leaf, and this is what we're going to be working on. I like using MDF because it's more stable than, say, plywood. There's no voids in it. It doesn't tend to warp once it's sealed. And that's why I'm going to show you from the beginning how I do the process, because I think that if you don't seal it right in that, it's like any wood, you can have problems with it, but it does make a really nice surface, and you can get big giant sheets that aren't going to warp on you and everything like that. So we're going to show you how, this is basically how I prep most of my MDF pieces, if not all. Since it's a little bit darker, though it varies with batch to batch, I like to use a light colored base. I don't want to use white because it'll be quite stark, so I like using Buttermilk by Deco Art. And as I said, I use that for most of my pieces. And I'm going to go through and show you. I know a lot of this is off camera, but I mean, it's nothing. I'm just going to use a wide brush. This is a 1-inch flat by Deco Art Traditions. I love their brushes. And I dampened my brush first, and I'm picking up some paint. And I don't want it too wet, but I want it wet enough to move across the piece. So I'm going to start painting. It needs a little more water. You can see it's sticking. You don't want to put too much water because the wood is going to absorb it, especially on the first coat, and it's going to swell. So you don't want to water it down a lot. But another thing is you really can't expect it to go on in one coat. I usually give it 3, which sounds like a lot, but it makes such a nice surface. I will show you why. I will show you why I do 3. The first coat we're putting down is going to get partially absorbed into the wood. We'll call it wood, even though it's particle board. It's easier to say. It'll get absorbed in, and what it's going to do, the acrylic and the paint will bind the fibers. So they'll kind of freeze them into place, if you can picture that. And then once it dries, we're going to be able to sand it, and then there's a layer down. It's gonna like seal the wood. Acrylic paint does this. I don't use sealer very often. You could use sealer if you want, but I find it almost makes the surface too slick, and then you still have to put on, you know, 3 or 4 subsequent base coats. But that's a personal preference. If you want to seal it, you could seal it. Now you can see it's streaky a little, and you could see the wood through, and you could almost see, I hope, the little, you know, bumps of the MDF coming up. One thing I did want to mention too on these beveled surfaces is we're going to avoid painting the side area, especially in the beginning, because if you get a lot of paint in this channel, then it won't fit into the background as easily. So you don't want like chunks of paint there. So try to use a flat brush and cast off, you know, go from the middle and pull. And I'm going in an up and down direction for this piece, especially because of the pattern that we want on it. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, our first layer of paint has dried, and if you rub your hand over it, you could feel it's gritty and bumpy, because as I said, what it did is the water and the paint was absorbed by the MDF, and it made it poof out a little bit. And the next step that we want to do is knock down this into a smooth finish. We don't want it bumpy and gritty like that. So I use these little sand pads, very fine grain, and just very lightly go over. And you could feel the difference. One side is very smooth and the other has the bumps on it. This only takes a minute. We're knocking down that initial raised grain, if you would, or raised pieces of MDF. And we're going to keep in that same direction again. And then I just take my paper towel and wipe it. This will get out some of the deeper brush strokes if you have brush strokes in there. Because as I said, you don't want to use too much water. You could hear it, it's even quieter because when you sand, because there's less resistance. You're sanding off all the little nasty bumps. Okay, and I use a paper towel to wipe, a clean one, because I do not like tack rags or tack cloths because they leave my hands sticky and they can leave film or something on your piece, and I don't want to take the chance of ruining my pieces like that. So once it's sanded, we're going to go for our second coat. Dampen the brush again, and this time it's going to go on smoother. So you want to hold the brush almost parallel to the surface and kind of just skate it across from the middle out. You want to keep your edges as clean as possible, as I said. If a little gets over, that's okay. You can sand it just slightly, but you're not going to be able to sand the edges too much with these bevel pieces, or they'll push through, and you really don't want that to happen. So I'm going to do that, clean it up, and that looks pretty good, and leave it there to dry one more time. And once again, I'll be back. You don't have to watch it dry with me. Alrighty, we're back again, and the second coat is dry. For our purposes, we could probably go ahead and paint now, but I want it really nice and smooth, so I'm going to go one more time, re-sand it, but this time even a lighter touch. We're not pushing down, we're just a quick skim sand, I call it, so you can just knock off anything that's still sticking up. And then once again, paper towel. And then I'm going to grab my damp brush, blot it on the paper towel, pick up some buttermilk paint, and put the final coat on. The final coat at the base, it is. And of course there's a hair in there. It's usually a miracle if I get something done without a cat hair in it. Now I could put a little more water in this so it doesn't have brush strokes because it has 2 layers of a barrier between the paint and the wood. So it does offer a little bit more, you know, protection against it. So once again, we're going to let this dry and then we'll be ready to move on. Okay, that layer is dry, and if I want, I could take one more little quick skim sand, just in case there were any brush strokes or that, and wipe it again. This paper towel is kind of damp. It's the one I used for my brush, and the back got damp, so that's good. It kind of holds off. It pulls off the little bits of paint, so we're good to go now. Okay, so this is how I base all my MDF pieces. Like my 12 days of Christmas ornaments are also 2-piece like this, and I did base both the front and the back, and I based the outside and the inside. Now I didn't do that on our leaf here because it's just going to be a solid black with dry brushing over it, but I will do 3 coats of the black when that time comes. I'll show you that later. And we'll get on to doing our background. Now, the goal of the background is to have an eerie look behind the kitty. I wanted this yellow to show through, but I wanted also greens and browns, and I wanted it to look like a dark, creepy little forest. I had tried this method, or I tried other methods using like the fluid acrylics and things like that because I thought they'd be more transparent and work better, but they're really not made for that type of layering, and they were peeling up, you know, with subsequent layers, and I figured out that I was better off using the regular Americana acrylics but using the semi-transparent colors, which is good that they do offer colors that are semi-transparent and some are more opaque and have more white in them, but I was very careful in my choice of colors so that we would be able to see through everything. So what we need to do first now is I'm gonna glaze the entire piece with yellow light, and I found that to be a nice transparent bright yellow. I'm gonna just put a little, I don't know if you really need to see this. This is just the top of my Stay Wet palette. I use that when I do background stuff, and instead of wasting space on the paper. I dampen my brush, and then I'm going to pick up just a bit of paint of the yellow. You can see how transparent it is on my palette. And kind of put a wash on it. And you could see how important it is to bring it first to that buttermilk color, because if I would have done this just on the MDF, it would have looked dull and crappy. And I do this a lot. I do a lot of layering in this piece. I think that's the key to these beautiful lights and darks is you have to layer. You have to do thin layers and do a lot of layers. The more layering you do, the more depth and variation in color you're going to get. So you could see how quick that was. I just washed it with the the yellow light. This is primary yellow, has a little more white in it. You don't want to use that yet. Wash it, and then we'll let it dry, and then we'll start the fun part. So one more time I'm going to go off and let it dry, and I'll be right back. Okay, the base is all dry, The next thing I want you to be sure of is that we have the pattern or the oval in the right orientation. It only fits into the leaf in one direction. You could see this is where I drilled the entry hole so I could separate the pieces by cutting them on a bevel. And because I'm human and not a computer or a laser, it does not fit the other way. It kind of fits because I do pretty good. If I do say myself, I've done thousands and thousands of them. So, I mean, I do pretty good, but they don't fit properly. They won't seat in there unless they're in the right orientation. Usually I drill my hole at the 4 or 5 o'clock point, so you can see there's a little notch there. I don't fill it. I fill it at the end if I feel it necessary, but that's always on the bottom. I've had some of the girls on the 12 days accidentally paint upside down because they're circles and it's still harder to tell. And I felt really bad because I've done that too myself. But anyway, that's the sad story with that. So we're going to start putting our layers on. And what I do when I paint in this manner is I go from light colors to dark colors because it's easier to add more and to progress with the darks than to go back and put a light over the dark because we want a semi-transparent background. So our next color up from the yellow is the green, which is Hauser medium green. And we're going to dry brush all these layers on. And what I love to use for dry brushing are Lori Spoutz's stencils brushes. I like them because they're a stiff bristle, but they're not too stiff. They're a nice in-between, and they have this rounded edge, almost like a dome shader. So you don't get those spiky little ends. They're really nice for blending. The bristles don't fall out. I think she offers a set of 4 sizes for about $20 US, which is awesome. I use both the 5/8 size for this project, and I use a smaller 3/8 size, which I believe are the 2 middle sizes. But for most of the background, I use a 3/8 for the clouds. But for most of the background, I use a 5/8 because I want a nice blend in there. So I put a little paint on my palette, picked up some on my brush. This is for those of you who haven't dry brushed, and wipe most of it off. All I want is a little bit of paint on the tip. And then I'm going to start swiping. Now you'll say, she doesn't have enough paint, but I do. You just have to be patient. You want to swipe it and build your color. To me, that's plenty of paint. That was my mistake. The first time I thought, I have to put more, and it came out in globs. And what's going to give this beautiful variegated effect is to go light and build little at a time. You know, if you're afraid to do it, if you're afraid for that first swipe, don't start in the middle. I'll show you. The pumpkins are going to be here, and the sky is going to be very dark. So you could start there or start here, and then you can get a feel for how much color. That's why I started down here. And I know some of you may be thinking, well, why is she bothering, doing those parts if they're going to be covered with paint? But it's good practice for one. And it just gives a more even flow of the design. I mean, you don't want to have to go around everything because everything will be clumped up then in this area. You won't get this streaky. See how, when you look at it, your eye, it continues behind the pumpkin. And that's how you want it to look. You don't want to stop at a certain area. Same with the sky. And believe it or not, even though the sky is going to be quite dark and that these undertones will show through, you may not realize it, but it'll make the design look like it belongs together. You won't have just a patch of blue and a patch of green or yellow, whatever. And another thing I'm going to mention when I did the kitty is avoid going too dark at the area around the cat. Since the cat is so black, I did a little dark my first time around, and I did wind up going back over it a little bit and brushing a little yellow, but it tends to look a little washed out. You have to use a yellow with a little bit more white in it, like the pineapple that's in the palette that I used with this. And then what I did is go over and retone it with the yellow light. I had to make sure I had the right color to tell you. The same with the green. This green has a little bit of, it's pretty opaque. It has a lot of white in it. So it's going to cover decent, but if you have to go and put a little more green, you might want to retone it with the primary yellow. You know, and that's the kind of fun artistic part about this, is no two will look the same. You know, yours won't look like mine don't look like my other ones. It's kind of an individual thing. So I only loaded the brush once. I'm going to take maybe just a little tiny touch more and put just a little more green in the middle area there. Because I don't want it too yellow. Okay? And the good thing is you can always go back and add, you know, more colors, which we'll do at the end, and I'll show you. Our next step up is Asphaltum, which is, again, it's a transparent dark brown. I didn't even clean my brush. I'm going to just use the dirty brush with it. That's another good thing about going dark to light. Just touch it in there. I won't scrub it on the green area because I don't want it to be green. I want it brown, so I'm going to start its own. I know that's out of camera range, but I'm just rubbing it into there. And then the same thing, I'm going to start down here. See how it's almost no paint? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there it is. It's so much easier if you build on a color than to try to pull it off. And believe me, I tried 3 times on this background before I got it right. And that's kind of why I did this one too. It was another practice one. So, I mean, and I've been painting a while. As my friend Vera says, this is not my first rodeo. But we still learn. You know, that's what makes it fun. Okay, so I'm going over that. I do want to go over that yellow a little. I don't want it stark yellow. I'm going to put some patches in there that are darker brown. So maybe do that. It's going to be more up in the sky, but I'm really bad at random. I just have to say that because I'm such an organized person and my thinking is organized. And even when I do, like, I remember I was painting with my friend Carrie. We were doing a roof of something, and we wanted to do random, and it looked like wallpaper because I do organized random. Okay, so for now, that's good. There's enough brown in there to give it brown, because our next color is going to be soft black, which is a very dark brown with black undertones, and it's also a semi-transparent color. Now my soft black seems a little, I don't know how to say it, gooey, I guess. And I don't know if it's a bad one or if it's just me, if that's how it is. Now for the soft black, I'm going to concentrate more on the edges, okay? Because I want those edges to be dark, because I want this to be a nice little spooky. So I'm really going to start pulling in a little more color here. And it's a slow go. You could turn your piece too, by the way. I've been trying to keep it in the camera range. This is where I tell you to be patient with yourself. Because if you try to rush it through, it's going to look gloppy and you'll lose all your undertones. Okay? A little more on the top. I want to tone that down a little. I think I want more green in it, and I might even go with the darker green, the Hauser Green Dark. So I'm going to put that on the palette. Notice I didn't wash my brush again. You really want to avoid rinsing your brush. There you go. That helped. I hope I put that in the instructions. If I didn't in the first download, I'm going to change them and resend them to Lori. I already sent them to Lori this morning. Poor Lori. She puts up with my tardiness. So do you guys, and I'm sorry. I'm always got 20 things going at once, though. And then dare I say I overbook? None of us do that except me, right? Okay, some dark green and now more brown. We'll go back to the soft black. And notice I'm doing the sky area too, because we want all these areas to be, have the same tones with them. So even though you might not see a lot of the tones underneath, they'll come through. I guess it's better to say even though you're not aware of the tones. Now this I'm going a little heavier on because I do want a good dark background. Mostly on the edges go dark. Okay. And now we'll try our blue. I think I'm going to rinse my brush before I go with the blue. And I want to clean the brush really well for that. And then I will come right back. Thanks. Okay, I went to the sink and cleaned my brush. I probably didn't have to clean it, but to me, I don't know. I just didn't want it to look too muddy, and especially on camera, I wanted you to see what I was doing. So I loaded the tip of the brush. This is primary blue. And I'm going to start at the top and pull it. We're always going in a vertical direction on this piece because we want it to look streaky. And I'm going to do around the edges a bit, as you see here, and come down a little bit in the middle. Now this blue with the green underneath looked really cool, I thought. It's almost like a phthalo blue. See how it looks a little green? Of course, because of the yellow, too. But I'm really going to kind of go to town to it on the top. Now it's looking great. And then you could do a couple swipes through the piece because the shadows are going to be a little blue. I'm going to grab a little more color. And pull it in one more time from the top where the clouds are going to come in. And the moon will be here. Kitty's in this area, so we're looking pretty good there. And finally, we're going to do our lamp black. This time again, we don't have to clean the brush. So we're going to put the little and take it off. And then start at the top again, because that's where you want it dark, and pull it in. And what's going to give the sky the bluer effect as well will be the next step when we do the clouds. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. Like, it doesn't look really like a blue sky at this point, but it will look bluer, we'll put it that way. And pumpkins are going to be here, Kitty's going to be here, but we still want a variance. Okay, now, for the most part, I'm rinsing my brush while I'm talking to you. For the most part, that looks good. That's about how I want it. However, I would like a little bit more warmer tones in there. So what I'm going to do, and this is optional, is glaze it a little bit with the yellow and the brown, the first brown, the lighter brown. So I'm going to put a little bit of primary yellow on my palette and a little bit of the Asphaltum. And take a little bit, a damp brush, and then just glaze. Put a little bit at a time on there. Make sure the black is dry. Now see, that's too much. You want to pull that off. But this will warm up the color a little bit. The brown will do well too. There you go. Just here and there. See how it gives it a nice warmer tone. And I guess my best advice is don't overdo it. And when you get to something you kind of like, leave it. So it's pretty close to the sample. Like I said, they're all going to be different, but I'm going to leave it like that. And when it's dry, we'll do the clouds. Okay? So I'll be back again. Okay, we're all dry. I use the dryer on it just to be sure. And we're ready to put in our little wispy clouds here. And for that, I want to use a smaller stencil brush, again by Lori Speltz. This is a 3/8 inch. And we're going to dry brush these clouds in. Okay? So, I'm going to start by putting a little bit of the primary blue on my palette. And also, I think a little blue chiffon. Now, when I load my brush, I'm going to put mostly blue chiffon. I hope you can see that. And then just touch it into the primary blue. Just a little bit, like the edge. So you have maybe a 4-to-1 ratio, which, let's not do the math, but somewhere around there. We want more of the blue chiffon than the blue. Take your paper towel, scrub it on, and then I don't suggest transferring the dotted lines that are on the pattern. We're just going to go about an inch from the top where the cat is. You just got to kind of guesstimate. It's clouds. So I'm going to start, and as I tap in the clouds, I want them random, and I'm going to turn my brush. So you can see the darker blue is starting to come in between the lighter clouds. This is another step that is very easily overdone. You don't want to cover everything. You want these kind of spooky and wispy. And I went down here a little bit like that. And then come up stronger in the middle. Okay, like that. Let this dry. Load your brush again with just the lighter color, the blue chiffon. Scrub it in. Get most of the paint out, and then this time push a little harder and soften those clouds. What I'm doing is I'm staying in the middle, and I'm kind of, there's a little hair coming out, kind of dragging, just a little push and drag. So you touch, pull, and lift, like that. Then it doesn't look so stipply. It looks softer. See how this is softening around the edges. Okay? Like I said, this area around the moon's going to be covered, but this is also how you do this really cool shading around the moon. Is you use, at this point, you'll use a deerfoot stippler. I used a 1/4 inch one, and just very lightly on the edge of it, just kind of soften it so it looks like a mist. And you do this after you do your shading on the inside of the moon, and we'll go over it with more clouds. And then later in the pattern, this is several steps down the line, I have you put some white, and I could do that now. It's okay, my brush is dirty because it's almost dry. I'm going to load up some white, and the white will go more as highlights, just here and there. I turn my brush so I get different angles of it. There you go. Okay. Like I said, don't do too much with it. And I think you're pretty much done. If you want a little more blue in it, you could take your palette, tip it in the blue, and then just, you know, maybe work some areas here and there underneath just to give it some color and interest. If you do too much, go back with the lighter color, okay? So, our background is done. You can tone it and play with it all you like, but don't overdo it. You know, it looks cool. I like the streaky effect. It looks really kind of spooky and nice, and I hope you like it too. I'll be back, and I will show you how to finish the back of the frame and glue that part together as well. Okay? Thanks.